Good evening, listeners. If you're still awake, if you're still out there, stay with me. Something is happening tonight. Something strange, something wrong. And I think you need to hear this. About 2 hours ago, an emergency alert flashed across my station's feed. One of those generic government warnings. You've seen them before. Usually they're about hurricanes, wildfires, missing persons. But this one was different. Biological hazard, containment protocols in effect. It came out of Black Ridge Research Facility, a place no one ever talks about because no one is supposed to know it exists. Located somewhere in the cold, desolate stretch of Wyoming wilderness, Black Ridge is a classified government site allegedly focused on advanced biological research. What kind of research? That's the million-dollar question. The first real sign that something had gone terribly wrong came not from officials, but from intercepted radio chatter. Security personnel at the facility were panicked. Short bursts of static-laced transmissions, urgent voices screaming over one another. Someone yelled about breach in Lab Theta, another about containment compromised. Not long after, local emergency services reported a fire at the site, except there were no visible flames, no smoke, just something burning, something eating through metal, concrete, entire structures, a corrosive substance seeping from the facility's lower levels. And that's when the military arrived, not in their usual slow-moving protocol-heavy way. No, this was fast, unnatural. Jets scrambled, helicopters hovered like vultures, armored convoys tore down remote highways in the dead of night. Whatever had been let loose, it had terrified the very people responsible for keeping the world in order. Eyewitness accounts are trickling in, scattered and frantic. A research technician, one of the few who made it past the outer perimeter, was found wandering a desolate road, clothes torn, skin slick with sweat, mumbling nonsense. The paramedics who picked him up reported that he kept repeating the same words. It came from inside the walls. It came from inside the walls. When they pressed him for more, he snapped, convulsed, and started screaming. And then the autopsy reports surfaced. Not from him, but from others. Bodies retrieved from the facility showed signs of severe internal trauma, ruptured rib cages, shattered sternums, as if something had burst from the inside out. The medical examiner's notes described something grotesque. Perforations along the esophageal lining, abnormal tissue growth along the chest cavity. A cavity, hollow but shaped as if something had once occupied it. Whatever killed these people didn't just kill them, it used them. A local news station tried to fly a drone over the site. It never made it back. A video feed was recovered, but only briefly. For a few seconds, the camera flickered, distorted by what looked like electromagnetic interference. But in the final frame, just before the signal cut, there was something. A glimpse of movement, fast, sinuous, crawling along the wreckage of the facility's outer walls. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a distortion, but the shape was unmistakable. A figure, humanoid but wrong, its body elongated, its head smooth and featureless. Then it turned toward the drone as if it knew it was being watched, and the feed went black. Authorities are saying little, but their actions speak louder. A 10-mile perimeter has been established. Civilians in nearby towns have been urged, quietly, without national news coverage, to stay indoors. But some didn't listen. Some went looking. Earlier tonight, I received a call from a man, his voice barely above a whisper. He and his brother had driven up near the outer fence, looking for answers. He described the air thick with an acrid chemical stench. The ground near the facility darkened as if something had seeped into the soil. Then the sounds, clicks, hisses. Something moving just beyond the tree line, too large to be any animal native to the area. His brother, foolishly, got out of the car. The moment his feet touched the ground, the noises stopped. A silence so deep it felt like the world had stopped breathing. And then something moved. Not in front of them, not behind, above. The last thing he saw before he fled was a shape descending from the trees, its limbs impossibly long, its silhouette blending into the night. He doesn't know what happened to his brother. He never saw him again. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, some underground bioweapon, some freak genetic experiment gone wrong. That would be the rational answer. But here's the thing. If this were something humans made, they'd have protocols to handle it. They wouldn't be panicking. They wouldn't be running. Whatever this is, it's not following the rules. It's something different. Stay with me. Stay listening. I'll keep you updated. But if you're near the exclusion zone, if you see strange shapes moving in the dark, get out. Because whatever was inside that facility, it's not inside anymore. You're still with me, right? Still listening? Good. Because something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. I don't know if it's the late hour, the static creeping into my signal, or the stories I've been hearing, but there's a heaviness in the air tonight. A weight. You can feel it pressing down, can't you? Like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. That facility, Black Ridge, it's gone dark. Not just the usual we can't disclose classified information kind of dark, but a complete total communications blackout. No emails, no phone calls, no emergency response teams coming out with their tight-lipped excuses. Just nothing. And the worst part, the official channels aren't even acknowledging it. Earlier this evening, I reached out to a contact of mine, a former government contractor, someone who's seen his fair share of ugly truths. I asked him what happens when a facility like Black Ridge goes off-grid. His response? Silence. A long, suffocating pause, followed by a whisper that sent ice down my spine. If they've stopped talking, it's because there's nothing left to say. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind to a few hours ago, when I first started noticing the gaps. You see, I have my own little ways of keeping track of things. Radio frequencies, encrypted signals, backdoor channels that usually hum with government chatter. The kind of static you hear when something big is going down. But tonight, dead silence. The only transmissions coming through are from scattered emergency responders, and even those are growing fainter, more frantic. One call stood out, a sheriff, breathless, voice shaking, whispering into his radio. It's in the mines that stopped me cold. Black Ridge isn't built near any active mining sites. Not officially, anyway. But if you know where to look, if you dig through enough redacted documents and old geological surveys, you'll find something interesting. Tunnels, caverns, a massive subterranean network stretching for miles beneath the facility. If something got loose down there, if it's moving underground, Jesus. But here's the thing. Whatever's happening, it's not staying contained. I started getting scattered reports from nearby towns, places that should be outside the danger zone. A rancher found his livestock mutilated, not eaten, not attacked by a predator, just opened up, hollowed out. No blood, no struggle, no footprints leading in or out, just a ruined body and a silence so heavy it made his ears ring. Then the power outages started. Not rolling blackouts, not storms knocking down lines, just entire sections of towns flickering out like a dying pulse. And the people, they're acting different. A woman called in about her neighbor, a quiet man, kept to himself, never caused trouble. She saw him last night, standing outside in the freezing cold, staring at the sky. He didn't blink, didn't move. Just stood there for hours, breath curling in the air, his head tilted slightly as if listening to something only he could hear. When she finally worked up the courage to check on him, he was gone. His door was wide open, his house empty, untouched, except for one thing. The walls, covered in deep, jagged scratch marks, like something had been trying to get out. Then the strangest report of all, the missing are returning. People who vanished near the facility, workers, scientists, security personnel, some of them are showing up again, but they're wrong. I spoke to a truck driver passing through one of these ghost towns. He saw a man wandering down the road, barefoot, shirt torn, his arms limp at his sides like a puppet with its strings cut. At first, the driver thought the guy had been in an accident, so he pulled over. But when the headlights hit him, the man stopped, jerked his head up in a sharp, unnatural snap, and then he started moving toward the truck. Not walking, not running, just gliding. The driver swore he saw something move beneath the man's skin. He panicked, threw the truck in reverse, and sped away. In the mirror, he caught one last glimpse. The man had stopped in the middle of the road, his mouth slowly stretching into a grin that never reached his eyes. I'm telling you all of this because I need you to understand, this isn't a normal outbreak. It isn't a virus. It isn't a simple biological containment failure. It's something else. Something intelligent, and it's spreading. But here's what keeps me up at night. The military knows. They aren't just responding to this disaster. They were prepared for it. I've seen reports, declassified documents, buried deep beneath layers of bureaucratic nonsense. Black Ridge wasn't just researching alien biology. It wasn't just studying something from another world. It was housing it, nurturing it. They didn't find it, they brought it here. And now it's free. This silence won't last. The storm is coming, and when it hits, there won't be anywhere left to hide. Stay with me, stay listening, and whatever you do, don't go outside. If you're still listening, if you're still out there, then you need to understand something. What happened at Black Ridge wasn't just an accident. It wasn't some minor breach that could be sealed up and forgotten. This was something else, something worse. A failure on a level so complete, so absolute, that there's no coming back from it. The government wanted containment, but whatever was inside that facility, it never needed containment to begin with, because it was never trapped, and now it's free. The first sign that things were spiraling out of control came from an intercepted military transmission, short, fragmented, barely comprehensible over the static. It was a convoy moving through the back roads of Wyoming, an emergency evacuation from the site. Soldiers, scientists, possibly even survivors. They were headed toward a secure checkpoint, maintaining formation, no signs of pursuit. That was the last official report before everything went silent. Then, a sharp burst of radio feedback, muffled shouting, overlapping voices, something slamming against metal. A soldier's voice cut through the noise, panicked and breathless, screaming to command that something was inside the trucks. And then, the line went dead. An hour later, a local rancher called in. He lived near the road where that convoy had passed. He said he saw their headlights in the distance, the line of armored vehicles moving in formation, engines roaring as they cut through the valley. Then, without warning, everything stopped, not like a normal traffic jam, not one by one. Every single vehicle, instantaneously, just shut down, as if something had gripped them all at once. The headlights flickered, the engines died, and then silence. No movement, no soldiers getting out, just stillness. He grabbed his binoculars and watched from his porch. At first, he thought they had hit a roadblock, maybe some kind of sudden mechanical failure. But then, he saw something open the doors. Not from the outside, from the inside. The figures that emerged weren't running for cover, weren't calling for backup. They simply collapsed onto the pavement, spilling out like discarded husks. There was something else moving inside the trucks, something dark, something slick, something that shouldn't have been there. The old man swore he saw shapes shifting in the shadows, a writhing mass, something stretching and coiling through the broken openings. And then, just as quickly, the headlights died completely. The last thing he saw before fleeing inside was the shapes unfolding, rising, stretching into the moonlight. They were too tall, too thin. Their movements were fluid, unnervingly precise, like predators who had been waiting for this moment. And that's when the screaming started. By the time he called me, he was whispering, barely breathing into the phone. He said they were outside his house now. They moved without sound, without hesitation, clinging to the barn walls, crawling across the roof. He said they didn't walk like men. They slid, crept, clung to surfaces in ways that defied logic. He could feel them watching him, even though he couldn't see their eyes. He swore one of them was standing just beyond the tree line, its elongated head tilting slightly in the darkness, like it was studying him, like it knew he was inside, but was in no rush to come in. I asked him what he meant, asked him why they weren't attacking, why they were just waiting. His response sent a chill down my spine. They're not hunting. They don't need to. They know we can't run. The line went dead. Since then, the emergency broadcasts have stopped. The distress signals, the military chatter, the scattered cries for help, they've all gone silent. Not gradually, not fading away, just gone. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't just a containment failure, this was extermination. Because here's the thing. Containment failures imply that something went wrong, that someone made a mistake. But Black Ridge had protocols. Layers of security, automated defenses, backup power, fail-safes designed to prevent this exact scenario. And yet, it still got out. That means one of two things. Either the thing they were studying was far smarter than they ever anticipated, or it was never contained in the first place. And now the government isn't deploying forces to secure the area. They're deploying them to erase it. There's a full-scale operation underway. Thermobaric strikes, drone deployments, napalm sweeps over the affected zones. They aren't setting up evacuation points. They aren't warning civilians. They're burning everything. But here's what's keeping me awake. What's making my skin crawl as I sit here speaking into this microphone, hoping someone out there is still listening. They're losing. The military is losing. Satellite footage, grainy, distorted but real, shows entire convoys being ripped apart, outposts gutted, bunkers breached from the inside. The things that came out of Black Ridge, they're adapting, changing. They're moving differently, avoiding traps, learning. This isn't just a biological outbreak. It's an invasion. And we aren't ready. If you're listening, if you're out there, get away from the hot zones. Do not trust the silence. Do not go looking for help. Do not assume that anyone in uniform has answers. This isn't a fight anymore. It's a countdown. And whatever came out of that facility, it doesn't need sleep. It doesn't need rest. It only needs us. I'll keep broadcasting as long as I can, but I don't know how much time we have left. This was the containment failure. The real nightmare starts now. I don't know who's still listening. Maybe you're tuning in from some distant outpost hidden in the hills, signal barely strong enough to reach me. Maybe you're barricaded in a basement, clutching a radio, hoping for some kind of explanation, some kind of reassurance that this isn't the end. I don't have that for you. What I have is the truth. And the truth is, it's spreading. Whatever was locked inside Black Ridge didn't stay there. The military thought they could clean it up, burn it out before the public caught wind of what really happened. They failed. The creatures didn't just escape the facility. They've infiltrated the surrounding regions. The speed at which they're moving is unnatural, defying even the worst-case projections. This isn't just a local containment issue anymore. This is an extinction event in motion. I picked up reports from emergency responders, 911 calls, distress signals, panic transmissions intercepted from police bands. They started hours after the breach, miles away from Black Ridge. That's what doesn't make sense. There shouldn't have been enough time for the creatures to move that far. But they did. I traced the locations, the timestamps, and what I found doesn't add up. It's as if they were already there. Let me walk you through some of the first calls. The first came from a trucker driving through the Wyoming backroads, a man named Dennis. He was hauling livestock, taking a detour due to military blockades, when he noticed something strange. A row of streetlights ahead of him, ones that had been glowing just moments earlier, started going out, one by one. The kind of outage that doesn't happen randomly. He slowed his truck, figuring maybe he'd blown a fuse, but then he saw something in his side mirror. A shape moving along the side of his trailer. He described it as blacker than the night itself, blending into the dark but unmistakably there. A long, slithering form clinging to the side of his truck, its surface glistening under the faint moonlight. He thought it was an animal at first, maybe a bear, maybe a panther, something that had leapt onto his truck while he slowed down. But then it moved up the metal, without effort, without resistance, as if gravity didn't apply to it. He floored the gas, trying to shake it off. That was his mistake. Dennis's last transmission was almost incoherent, sobbing, gasping, trying to form words between ragged breaths. He said something had peeled open the roof of his cab like a tin can. Something long, skeletal, unnatural, pulling itself inside, its weight shifting without a sound. The next thing we heard was a crash, then static. They found his truck overturned in a ditch 30 miles from his last known location. No sign of Dennis. The windshield was shattered, the seatbelt sliced apart, but there was no blood, no struggle, no footprints leading away. Just deep gouges in the metal, claw marks that cut straight through the steel. And that was just the beginning. Within hours, emergency calls surged across multiple counties. Families going missing overnight, entire farmhouses found deserted with half-eaten meals still on the tables. Security cameras catching glimpses of something inhuman, something thin, elongated, moving through the fields with unnatural grace. Cattle ripped open, their insides hollowed out as if something had been harvesting them. And then came the real horror. A survivor, one of the only ones to make it out of those early incidents, managed to call in. A woman named Claire. She had locked herself in her home after hearing strange sounds outside. Not banging, not footsteps, something breathing. Deep guttural inhalations, like a predator testing the air for prey. She shut off her lights, held her breath, and peered through the blinds. That's when she saw it. It wasn't walking, it wasn't running. It was crawling, skittering on all fours, moving with a precision that felt disturbingly deliberate. Its limbs were too long, too thin, jointed in ways that shouldn't be possible. And the head, elongated, smooth, featureless, except for the glint of something wet, something sharp catching the faint glow of the moon. It was tasting the air. And then it turned, not toward her house, toward her. She swears it knew she was watching, that it could feel her heartbeat from behind the glass. That's when it did something she wasn't prepared for. It stood up, slowly, deliberately, unfolding itself from that crouched position, rising to its full height. And then it smiled. Or at least, that's what she thought it was. A split in the darkness, a widening of something along its head, revealing rows upon rows of needle-thin teeth. She ran. She locked herself in the basement, clutched her phone, and called for help. But by the time authorities arrived, there was no sign of the creature. Just long, thin scratches along the outside of the house, patterns carved into the wood, almost like writing. She hasn't spoken since. This is what's happening. The military has no control over this. They can't even track the spread. The creatures aren't just wandering aimlessly. They're moving with intent, with strategy. They don't attack at random. They stalk, they study, they choose their moments with terrifying precision. And they're not staying in the rural areas. Reports are now coming in from Denver, Salt Lake City, even as far as Chicago. The pattern is always the same. People disappear. Surveillance cameras glitch out. Entire neighborhoods go silent overnight. And yet there's no mass panic. No breaking news alerts. The media is quiet, too quiet. The government is doing everything in its power to suppress this. But they can't hide it forever. Not when highways are turning into ghost roads. Not when evacuation orders are given in secret, disguised as natural disaster warnings. Not when the power grids start failing in affected zones, plunging entire districts into engineered darkness. Because that's where they hunt best. In the dark. I don't know how much longer I can keep broadcasting. I don't know how far this will spread before it's too late. But listen to me. You need to leave. If you're in a major city, if you live near the containment zones, get out now. Don't wait for official statements. Don't assume you'll be warned. Because by the time they acknowledge this publicly, it'll already be too late. I'll keep you updated as long as I can. But remember this, they are watching. They are listening. And if you ever feel like something is just outside your window, standing in the darkness, it already knows you're there. If you're still listening, if this signal is still reaching you, I need you to understand something. The situation is no longer contained to isolated incidents, remote highways, or quiet farmhouses. The creatures are here, in the cities, among us. I don't know how much of the news you're still getting. Maybe your TV stations are still broadcasting the same recycled headlines, rolling blackouts due to grid instability, or evacuations ordered amid rising public safety concerns, as if this is some kind of natural disaster. It's not. This is an extermination in progress, and the ones calling the shots are not human. This isn't speculation anymore. This isn't fringe reports from distant counties. I've seen it myself. I've watched the skyline burn. I've listened to entire districts go silent in real time. One moment alive with distant traffic, sirens, the hum of civilization. The next, a dead vacuum of nothing. We lost Denver first. At least, that's the first major city that fell overnight. There were no riots, no chaotic evacuations like in the movies. One evening, it was a bustling metropolis. People heading home from work, streetlights flickering against the snowfall, radio stations humming with talk shows and music. And then, as dawn approached, every transmission from the city cut off. We didn't even know it first. The silence wasn't instant. It spread like a power outage, district by district, block by block. Emergency responders tried to call in. No response. The National Guard, already stretched thin, attempted to make contact with their units inside the city perimeter. Nothing came back. And then the drone footage surfaced. It was broadcast internally, never meant for public viewing. A reconnaissance drone deployed from a nearby military outpost captured the aftermath. Denver was empty. No traffic, no movement, no signs of life, not even the usual flickers of emergency lighting from buildings running on backup power. Just an expanse of darkened towers and abandoned streets, shrouded in the pale light of dawn. And then, as the drone operator panned the camera across the skyline, they saw something. Not bodies, not blood. Shadows moving unnaturally across the rooftops. Shapes clinging to the sides of buildings, skittering along glass windows with insect-like precision. They didn't seem to care about the drone at first. They were too focused on something below. The streets. The footage cut out before we could see more, but the radio transmissions, the ones intercepted from before the blackout, painted a clearer picture. Calls from survivors holed up in high rises, watching the things slink through the streets below. One man described seeing his neighbors being dragged out of their apartments, not screaming, not fighting, just frozen in place, like their minds had already given up before their bodies were taken. A mother whispered through a panicked phone call that she was hiding with her son in a maintenance closet, listening to something scrape against the walls outside. Not knocking, not banging, just testing, tasting. And then there was the last transmission from a local emergency broadcaster. His station kept running long after the city had gone quiet, his voice the only human sound left in the abyss. He spoke softly, slowly, deliberately, not out of fear, but resignation.
They don't kill out of instinct. They choose. They study. They learn. And when they find you, it's already too late. If you're hearing this, don't come looking for us. Denver is theirs now.
That was 2 nights ago. The city is still dark, no reports of survivors, no military counterattack, just emptiness. And then it spread. Chicago, Salt Lake City, Minneapolis, Houston. The pattern is the same. The slow, eerie silence creeping over the city before it vanishes entirely. Not a single report of mass panic. No footage of people running, screaming, fighting back. Just people disappearing. And the bodies we do find, they're not torn apart, they're not eaten, they're hollow. Their skulls split open along the back, the brain matter gone. What do they need it for? What are they taking from us? Memories, knowledge, something else entirely? I don't have answers yet. I just know this. It's not random. They're not killing us because they need to survive. They're doing it because they want to, because they enjoy it. I intercepted a transmission an hour ago. It wasn't meant for public ears. It came from inside the Pentagon. The military isn't just aware of what's happening, they're already retreating. Evacuations of high-ranking officials began last night. Not emergency procedures, not countermeasures, a full-scale withdrawal. They're abandoning the capital. That's why the public hasn't been warned. They don't care about stopping this. They're saving themselves. And when they're gone, they'll let the rest of us burn in the dark. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep this station running. The city I'm in, it's not safe anymore. The power grid is flickering. The roads are eerily quiet. That's how it starts. First the silence, then the disappearance. I have to move. I have to find somewhere secure. But before I go, listen to me carefully. If you're in a major city, get out. Leave now. Don't wait for an evacuation order. Don't wait for the government to acknowledge this. By the time they do, you'll already be surrounded. Stay away from the shadows. Stay away from the silence. And if you see one of them, if you so much as sense that something isn't right, run. Because by the time you hear them coming, by the time you realize they've been watching you this entire time, it's already too late. If you're still out there, if you're still alive and listening, this war isn't over. They took Denver, they took Chicago, they silenced Houston. The blackouts are spreading and entire cities are falling into a quiet, eerie nothingness. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I have something different to report. We fought back and we won, at least for now. It wasn't the military that did it. It wasn't some last-minute government miracle. It was ordinary people, survivors, fighters, people like you and me who refused to just lay down and disappear. The first real counterattack happened in Dallas. The creatures thought they had the same advantage as before. The slow creep of silence, the gradual breakdown of communications, the disappearance of key infrastructure before anyone truly realized what was happening. But this time, people knew. They had heard the broadcasts. They had seen what happened to other cities. And when they felt the power grid falter, when they noticed the first neighborhoods going dark, they didn't wait for an evacuation order. They armed themselves. This wasn't a desperate last stand with frightened civilians holed up in their homes. No, this was an organized, methodical response. Ex-military, police, gun owners, and survivors who had seen the signs forming small, tactical groups. They didn't run. They set traps. We had assumed at first that conventional weapons wouldn't work on these things, that they were invulnerable, that bullets, fire, explosions, nothing could stop them. The government certainly acted like that was the case. It's why they retreated without a fight. But they were wrong. Dallas proved it. Here's what we know now. The creatures can be killed, but you have to hit them in the right place. Shooting them in the chest, the limbs, or even the head, useless. Their bodies don't function like ours. They don't have centralized organs the way humans do. No lungs, no traditional circulatory system. Wounds that would be fatal to us are meaningless to them. But they do have a weakness. The key isn't just to shoot them, it's to burn them, to disrupt whatever biological structure keeps them moving. Survivors in Dallas found that high-intensity incendiary rounds, white phosphorus, and even homemade Molotov cocktails were effective in stopping them. Not just slowing them down, killing them outright. And their reaction, they weren't expecting it. The battle lasted through the night. Streets became war zones, homes became strongholds. Survivors who had been forced into hiding emerged to fight. Reports say that at least 30 of the creatures were killed in Dallas alone. The rest, they did something we haven't seen before. They retreated. These things, whatever they are, they think, they plan, they strategize. Up until now, they've been executing a near-perfect extermination of humanity. But when faced with organized armed resistance, they pulled back. And that means they're not invincible. But I won't lie to you. It wasn't a clean victory. Dallas may still be standing, but it's wounded. In the aftermath of the battle, survivors searched the streets for those who had been taken. Some were found, but they weren't the same. Some were hollowed out husks, their skulls cracked open, their minds stripped away. Others, they were still alive, but their eyes were empty, their movements unnatural. Something had been done to them. There are reports of changed survivors suddenly turning on their own people, attacking without warning. It's still unclear if this is a form of mind control, an infection, or something else entirely. The only thing we know for sure is that it's spreading. This is where we stand now. The creatures have suffered their first real defeat in Dallas, but the war is far from over. More cities are under siege, more people are vanishing, but now we have knowledge. We know they can be killed, we know they fear fire, and we know they aren't unstoppable. If you're listening to this, wherever you are, don't give up. Don't hide in the dark and wait for them to take you. Arm yourself. Protect your people. And if they come for your city, your town, your home, make them regret it. If you can still hear me, if your radio is still picking up my signal, then you need to know the truth. This isn't just a crisis anymore. It's not just an invasion. It's the end of everything we knew. The fall wasn't slow. It wasn't measured. It was a single, terrifying plunge into the abyss, and I'm watching it happen in real time. Our world is collapsing. Cities have fallen. Governments have disintegrated. Communications are all but gone. And the worst part? This wasn't a war. This wasn't a struggle for dominance between two opposing forces. It was a slaughter. It happened so fast, faster than anyone expected, faster than any of us could react. We thought we had time. After the victory in Dallas, there was hope, a brief flicker of resistance that told us we could fight back, that we could win, that if we armed ourselves, fortified our towns, and organized, we had a chance. That hope lasted less than a week. The creatures had learned from Dallas. They adapted. They stopped attacking recklessly. No more crawling through the streets. No more skittering through alleyways in full view. Instead, they waited. The counterattacks had given them something far more valuable than territory. It had given them an understanding of how we fought, our tactics, our weapons, our weaknesses. And so, when the next cities fell, when Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Atlanta vanished overnight, there was no battle, no screams, no desperate fights in the streets. There was just silence, a heavy, suffocating stillness, the same eerie quiet that had swallowed Denver and Chicago. This time, there weren't even distress calls, no radio chatter from survivors, no reports from military units. Just darkness. The only thing we heard, the only sound that remained, was the static-filled hiss of abandoned emergency channels. That's when we knew this wasn't a war, this was an extermination. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. If you're still waiting for the government to step in and fix this, if you're still holding on to the belief that there's some covert military operation coming to save us, there is no government anymore. Washington, D.C. is gone. We lost contact with it 3 days ago. No broadcasts, no emergency declarations, nothing. A full-scale evacuation of high-ranking officials had already begun before the attack, and what we now know is that most of the leadership abandoned the capital before it fell. Where did they go? We don't know. The last intercepted transmission from inside the Pentagon mentioned a classified bunker system in the Appalachian Mountains. But if you think that means they're still out there, still coordinating a resistance, don't. Because yesterday that signal cut out too. The federal government is no longer in control. The chain of command has collapsed. Military installations are being abandoned one by one, overrun, or simply disappearing. The United States is no longer a functioning nation. We are on our own. And now, as if all of this wasn't bad enough, we've made another discovery. A terrible, horrifying discovery. The things that first attacked us, the ones we thought we understood, they were just the beginning. Something new is emerging. Survivors in the Rocky Mountains reported sightings of different forms. Larger, more intelligent. No longer just crawling and hunting in the dark, but building, constructing something. No one knows what. Maybe they're evolving. Maybe they've been evolving this entire time, and we were too busy dying to notice. Maybe the first wave was nothing more than scouts. And if that's true, if what we've seen so far is only the beginning, then we're already too late. If you're in a city, get out. It doesn't matter if you haven't seen them yet. It doesn't matter if things seem normal where you are. It's coming. Every single city will fall. There are no exceptions. The ones that haven't been attacked yet are already dying in other ways. Gas supplies are running dry. Food shipments have stopped. Without supply chains, supermarkets are stripped bare in days. Without power, water treatment plants are failing. And then there's the people. There's something that happens when the structure of society collapses. When people realize there are no more rules, no more consequences. I'm hearing more and more reports of looting, gang warfare erupting in the ruins of places that should have been strongholds. We are tearing ourselves apart before the creatures even get the chance. The cities are death traps now. If you're still inside one, leave. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. You have one choice, escape or die. I won't lie to you. I don't know what happens next. I don't know how much longer I can keep broadcasting. I don't know if anyone is even listening anymore. But I refuse to go silent. As long as I have power, as long as this station is still standing, I will keep telling the truth. I will keep warning those who are still out there. Because this isn't over, not yet. Not as long as we are still breathing. If you're out there, if you're listening, don't give up. Keep moving, keep fighting, find others, stay armed, stay vigilant, and most of all, don't let the silence take you. I don't know how many of us are left. At first, it was impossible to tell. Reports came in from all over, scattered voices calling out across broken transmissions, survivors whispering through crackling static. There was hope in those voices, a desperate resilience, but one by one, they started to disappear. Some went silent in the middle of a sentence, their words cut off as if they had simply ceased to exist. Others faded away gradually, their signals growing weaker until all that remained was an empty hum. Now the airwaves are quiet, too quiet. The survivors that remain don't call out anymore. They don't risk broadcasting their location, don't reach out for help. They've learned. Survival means silence. We used to think that numbers would protect us, that gathering together would increase our chances. But the more we clustered, the faster we vanished. Entire outposts, gone without a trace. No signs of battle, no destruction, just empty shelters, discarded belongings, and the lingering sense that something had passed through, sweeping away all evidence of life. Whatever these creatures are, whatever force drives them, they are not mindless predators. They don't hunt us in the way we expected. They erase us. The cities are lifeless now, not ruined, not burning, just hollowed out. I've spoken to those who ventured back, searching for supplies, for answers. They all describe the same thing. No bodies, no blood, just vacant streets where millions once walked, buildings untouched but eerily wrong, like stage sets waiting for actors that will never return. It's not abandonment, it's negation. We are being undone. Some survivors have tried to find patterns, to predict where the next disappearance will happen. They've charted movement, listened to the few remaining military broadcasts, tracked the vanishing settlements, but there is no pattern, no logic. It's as if we exist one moment and then simply don't. The ones who stay moving last the longest. The ones who linger too long in one place, they fade. I don't know if they're taken, consumed, or simply unmade. I don't know which fate is worse. The last safe zones are failing. The strongholds, those fortified bunkers, underground shelters, military installations that once seemed impenetrable, are one by one going dark. I listened as Outpost Echo tried to hold the line. They were fully armed, prepared for an invasion. But no invasion came. The soldiers kept watch for something, some physical enemy they could shoot, contain, push back. What happened instead? Silence. They lost contact with one sector, then another. The perimeter patrols never returned. The base's power flickered, their transmissions grew distorted, and then within minutes the commanding officer, his voice clear, unwavering just moments before, began to forget. Live on air, I listened as he struggled to recall where he was, what his mission had been, who he was even speaking to. His words slurred, his thoughts unraveled, and then nothing. Echo fell without a sound, without a struggle, leaving behind only a faint, droning hum on their frequency, a noise that soon faded to dead air. Some survivors claim that the world itself is changing, that the land isn't the same as it was before. They describe impossible landscapes, places where time feels distorted, where distances stretch or collapse unpredictably, where shadows seem to linger too long, as if cast by something unseen. There are whispers that the further you go from what remains of civilization, the more reality begins to break down. Eleanor, the woman in the lighthouse, spoke of this. She swore that the ocean was the only thing left untouched, that everything behind her, the forests, the land, the towns, was dissolving. So where does that leave us? The last of us, hiding in the shadows of a world that no longer feels like ours? I wish I had an answer. I wish I could offer something more than this grim inventory of the vanished. But I don't. What I do know is that we are running out of places to hide, running out of time to be. And the worst part, I don't even know if we're dying. Because death would mean something remained. A body, a grave, a trace. But we are leaving nothing behind. And soon, maybe too soon, I'll be nothing more than another empty broadcast. If you can still hear me, if this signal is still reaching you, then know this. You are one of the last. The radios are failing, not just mine, all of them. I've been cycling through the frequencies for hours now, listening, searching. What was once filled with voices, emergency broadcasts, military channels, survivors calling out to each other, has gone silent. Nothing but dead air, an endless void stretching across the airwaves. I think I might be the only one left speaking, but even that won't last much longer. It's hard to say when the end truly began. Maybe it was when the first station went dark, or when the last convoy left the cities and never returned. Maybe it was when the military stopped answering distress calls, or when the sky itself started to feel wrong, as if the world was shifting into something unfamiliar. Or maybe it was always inevitable. The creatures didn't just invade. They didn't just destroy. They consumed everything. Our homes, our cities, our very existence. There was no resistance, no war, no last stand. Just people vanishing, settlements going dark, and a quiet, creeping realization that we were being erased, piece by piece. I don't know how many of us are left. Hundreds, dozens, fewer. Every time I try to reach out, I hear nothing but static. Maybe some are still out there hiding like Harlan did, making themselves small, invisible, untraceable. But I have no way of knowing. A week ago, I made contact with a group somewhere in the Rockies. They were armed, prepared, convinced that there was still a way to fight back. They had maps, escape routes, supplies. They believed they could reach the last known stronghold before it was too late. Their signal cut out 2 days ago. They haven't come back. Eleanor was the last survivor I spoke to. She was alone, holed up in a lighthouse on the East Coast, watching the waves crash endlessly against the shore. She told me she could still see the ocean stretching before her, infinite and untouched, but the land behind her was wrong, blackened, twisted, unnatural. The land itself is changing, she whispered before the line went dead. I don't think it's ours anymore. The last of the cities have fallen, but not in the way we once imagined destruction. There were no explosions, no firestorms, no ruins. The buildings still stand. The streets are still paved, but they are empty. Not abandoned. Empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no lingering remnants of human life. Just places that once were, now hollowed out like a memory fading from existence. The creatures didn't destroy these places. They simply removed us from them, as if we were never there to begin with. And that, I think, is the worst part. If we had gone out screaming, if we had fought until the last breath, at least we would know that we tried. But that's not what happened. The world didn't end with a battle. It ended with a slow, quiet unraveling. This was never an invasion. Invasions have a purpose. Invasions have conquerors. But this was different. This was extermination. The creatures didn't want to rule us. They didn't even acknowledge us. We were nothing to them. An anomaly, a mistake that needed correcting. I think that's why the last survivors keep vanishing. Why the cities aren't burning, but simply becoming voids. We aren't being hunted anymore. We're just disappearing. I don't know how much longer I have. The power is flickering. The equipment is failing. My voice feels like it's slipping away, like the very act of speaking is becoming harder, like I'm being pulled into the same silence that has swallowed everyone else. But I need to say this. If you're still out there, if you can still hear me, remember what we were. Remember the world as it was, because I think that's the only thing left now. We won't leave behind ruins, we won't leave behind records. The creatures have seen to that. But as long as someone remembers, even just one person, then maybe in some way we still exist. Maybe we aren't gone. Not yet. Not completely. If anyone is still listening, if there's even a single person left out there tuning into this frequency, then hear me now. You may be the last. The airwaves are empty. The world has gone quiet in a way that feels wrong. Not the natural silence of an abandoned place, not the eerie stillness of a city long deserted. This is something else. It's like the world itself is being smothered. Every night, the static on my radio grows heavier, thicker, like a presence pressing in from all sides. The signals don't fade, they're consumed. Taken by something that doesn't just erase the voices, but the very idea that they were ever there. I have spent countless hours searching through frequencies, hoping to find a survivor, a whisper, anything to prove that I'm not alone. But there is nothing. Nothing. No distress calls, no emergency broadcasts, no voices clinging to the last dregs of hope. It's just me now. Just this station, this failing transmitter, this flickering power source struggling to keep the signal alive. And even that won't last much longer. I've tried to piece together what happened to understand what went wrong, but the truth is, I don't think we were ever meant to understand. The creatures didn't invade. They didn't conquer. They removed. This wasn't a war, wasn't an extinction-level event in the way we once imagined. It was something else, something far worse, a quiet unraveling, a slow, methodical deletion of our existence. And now, we're at the end of it. The end of us. The cities are gone, not in ruins, but in absence. They still stand, their structures intact, their streets untouched, but they aren't ours anymore. They feel like empty husks, abandoned shells of a world that no longer belongs to us. It's as if whatever force is at work here has rewritten the very fabric of our reality, scrubbed us from history. You can walk through a town that once held thousands and not find a single trace of human life. No bodies, no belongings, no memories. It's like we were never here at all. I ventured outside today for the first time in weeks. The air was heavy, thick with something I can't describe. It wasn't fog, wasn't smoke, but it felt alive. The way it moved, the way it clung to my skin, it was like stepping into something that wasn't meant for me, something I wasn't supposed to touch. The sky was wrong. Not dark, not stormy, just empty. As if the very concept of the sky had been erased, leaving behind a vast, colorless void. I walked through the streets of what was once a town. I don't even know its name anymore. That's another thing. I can't remember names, can't remember places. They're slipping away, one by one, as if my mind is unspooling along with the world itself. I passed houses that should have been familiar, buildings that should have meant something. But they were hollow, their walls untouched yet lifeless. I kept walking, searching for any sign that this was still a place where humans had once lived. But the streets had been wiped clean. There were no footprints, no signs of movement, just an overwhelming, suffocating nothingness. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I don't think we were ever supposed to be here. Maybe that's what this was all along. Not an invasion, not an attack, but a correction. Maybe we were never meant to exist in the first place. Maybe we were an anomaly, a glitch in whatever grand design governs the universe. And now, whatever force shapes this reality has finally come to erase the mistake. I don't know how much longer I have. The station is failing. The lights flicker more often now. The air feels thicker, and my own thoughts are becoming loose. There are moments, longer now, where I forget what I was saying, where the words slip from my grasp even as I try to hold on to them. I am fading. I can feel it happening. But if you're still listening, if this reaches even one last person before the signal dies, then hear me now. You are real. No matter what happens next, no matter how much of the world is erased, no matter if they take the last of us, you were here. We were here. And as long as someone remembers, as long as a single voice carries forward, then we are not truly gone. The signal is flickering. The static is louder now, pushing in, threatening to consume the last of my words. I don't know if I'll get to say anything else, but I need to say this. If you are out there, do not let them take you. Do not let them erase you. Hold on, even if it's just in your mind. Hold on to the world as it was. Hold on to yourself. This is my final broadcast. If you hear this, if you can still remember, then we existed. That has to count for something.